Hey, what is going on, everybody? So, in this lesson, we're gonna figure out why finding the correct stakeholder is very, very important. And when I mean stakeholder, I'm talking about the person that makes the buying decision at a company. So, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you figure out who this stakeholder is, why do you want to email them first? This is versus a cold call or sending them or hitting them up on social media. Why is it that you want to use email? And the reason is because email is very non-intrusive. A lot of the times people use email as a form of communication, and if you want to, see if there's a fit to work with each other, email is the most non-intrusive way where you can kind of say like, hey, are you interested in what I have? If not, it's totally fine and it's totally cool. The second thing is email is super cool because there's very low cost and there's very low commitment in terms of time. To send an email is essentially free, and it's a lot stronger than cold calling because when you try to cold call someone, they don't always pick up the phone and it takes a lot of time to actually talk to them on the phone, or sometimes you don't get the right person. So if you email the right stakeholder right away, then it's going to save you a lot of time and money. And lastly, people check their emails every single day. So if you're working and you're in a working environment or even a corporate environment, it's pretty obvious that most people check their work email every single day because that's the main form of how people communicate. So not only is email non-intrusive, it's something people check all the time. So if you do send something, chances are that they are gonna see your email. So now that we established why emailing makes sense as the first point of contact, let's go ahead and dive into like the stakeholders of a company. So when you're finding the correct stakeholders, again, you want to talk to the person who has the power to make a decision, and that decision is a buying decision to purchase your product or service. Now, you don't want to talk to the people who are low-level employees, and what that means is you don't want to talk to the low-level recruiters or the low-level salespeople or the people that, if it's a mom and pop shop, you don't want to talk to that guy that works at the cashier because they aren't the people that have the power to make the decision. So if you get them on the phone, a low-level employee, you have to convince them that whatever you have is good, and they have to convince their boss that whatever you have is good, and they probably can't sell the product or service as well as you can. That's why you want to email the correct stakeholder right off the bat so that the person who makes the decision knows exactly who you are and what your value prop is, so you can get a quick decision on whether or not it's a fit. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through a lot of steps before you actually talk to the right person if you go for the low-level employees. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is high-level people, meaning, the C-suite, CEOs, CMOs, CFOs, and the founders love to delegate. And so a lot of times, it's not necessarily the top people who are evaluating a software or service or whatever it is that you have to offer. A lot of times they just read the email, see that it's a good idea, and they'll tell another person to vet it out and see if it's a right fit. So a lot of times, even if you're hitting up the correct stakeholder, they may push you down to a lower level person who actually will vet it out, and then they will make the decision. But we'll go into more about what that strategy means as the course go on. But the main thing here is that it's always the best to go for high level people, and going for low level people, it's not necessarily a waste of time. Sometimes you could do it so that you can learn more about the company you're trying to sell to. But in this case, if you want to use the max amount of time to get the max amount of efficiency, going for the high level people is where it's gonna be. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the stakeholders. So your goal at the moment is to find the stakeholder's name, and that is it. Remember, we're working in batches. So the first step was you're identifying your ideal customer profile. Second one was finding all the companies, and I showed you guys how you can find a list of different companies using all these resources. And the next step of the batching process is to find the stakeholder's name at that company. And again, you might want to find more than one person at a company just in case that person does not respond. And after we find who that stakeholder is, we're going to later in another section find out their email address, and then we're going to email them. So right now, let's focus on finding who exactly you should put on your list from a stakeholder name perspective. So this is going to be the organization blueprint that I created for you guys, and essentially every company in the US is structured in this way for the most part. Some organizations are a little bit more flat, but for corporate environments and even for smaller companies, they do follow this typical structure. So we're gonna go focus your attention at the top where the C-suite is at. So in the C-suite, you're gonna get people like the founder, CEO, CMO, COO, CIO, CFO, and whatever O. So these are the people who are the chief executive officers, and these are the people who typically have the most pull in the organization, and this would include the founder as well. After the C-suite, it's going to be your vice presidents. Now, depending on the type of companies you go after, they may not have this level of organization, so there may be no vice presidents. But in the case you're going for more larger companies, vice president comes after, so it's VP marketing, VP engineering, VP finance, basically anything with a vice president in its title is going to be next in the line of order. Now, after vice presidents, it's going to be your directors, like directors of marketing, engineering, finance, or whatever industry or section that you're going after. So that's going to be the next section, and a director usually manages a bunch of different managers, and that's why managers is right underneath it, like marketing manager, sales manager, recruiting manager, whatever. So with the managers, they typically handle the individual contributors, and these are the people who are actually doing the groundwork, like the marketer, the recruiter, the accountant, or the person that works in the front desk, like these kinds of people. So when you're looking at the organization blueprint, like I mentioned in the last slide, you do not want to go for the individual contributors. Now, you would only want to go for them if you're trying to collect information, but it's very unlikely that an individual contributor will have enough say in a company to influence the C-suite, because there's a lot of steps before you get there. And so what you typically want to do is, sometimes managers may be good, but for the most part, managers are a part of the day-to-day operations, and they don't necessarily make the strategic decisions of a company. So that's why you want to focus your attention on the C-suite, the VP suite, and the director level. So the top 3 levels is where you want to focus your attention. And so when you're finding the stakeholder, you want to think about who is exactly the type of person you want to talk to. If you're selling, let's say, a marketing software, then obviously you want to go for the chief marketing executive, vice president of marketing, the director of marketing, and possibly vice president of IT who has to implement that software. Or if you're selling consulting services and it's also related to advertising and marketing, again, you want to go for CMO, CEO, vice president of marketing, and the director of marketing. But if you're doing something like, if you're selling like accounting services, you want to go for the CFO, director of finance, and titles like that. So you really want to think about who exactly, what arm of the company should you be going after, and then you want to pick 1 to 4 people at that company to reach out to. And so in terms of how to find the people you're looking for using the organizational blueprint, here's how I generally look at what resources to use in order to find the people at a company. The first one is LinkedIn, and this is in the order of importance. So I usually start with LinkedIn first and try to find the people that I'm going for on LinkedIn. If I can't find them on LinkedIn, I'm going to go over to their company website to see if I can find their names there. Next thing after that, I'm going to go through my personal network to see if anyone can introduce me to someone at that company. And then finally, the last part is articles and press releases. Sometimes we get a lot of executives who write articles and press releases or have videos out, and that's a really easy way to find their name. Again, you're not necessarily trying to find their email quite yet. You just want to batch down and get as many names as possible for the companies that you've identified may be a good fit for your product or service. So that's pretty much everything you need to know in terms of who you should go after when it comes to stakeholders, where you can find them. And for the rest of this section, we're going to show you exactly step by step how you can identify who these people are using LinkedIn, their company website, your personal network, and finally your articles and press releases. So if that sounds good, I'll see you guys in the next lesson.